the channel on our episode of Off The Underside. This week we've got another fantastic guest. He's a journalist, commentator and author, Mr. Bill Leckie. How you doing, pal?
I'm good. How are you?
Aye, I'm good,
Good to
mate. I'm
see
good,
you.
man. It's a real pleasure to have you on, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you
No
all.
problem at all. Thank you, mate.
No problem.
So Bill, on this channel, mate, we like to go right back to the start.
Yes,
You're a young band. You grew up in Foxbar and Paisley.
I
At
was.
what
Did.
point did you realise that you wanted to become a journalist, mate?
Very young, primary school age. My first little bit in a newspaper when I was 8, in one of the local papers in Paisley, writing a wee match report about a St Mirren game because my primary school headmaster was a part-time journalist, which was the first time I realised you could do these things. You could get into the football for free, you know. It was a St Mirren game back in the old First Division in 1971, and that was me off. My first job was in the Clydebank Press in 1981, and from there I've just kind of tried to work my way through and not get found out, which so far has worked out all right.
How did the environment of Paisley and Foxbar shape your passion for sports journalism?
I, I, I don't know. I mean, I grew up in a really nice, just a really nice wee street and upper close and a wee council, wee council scheme. Um, and my headmaster at primary school, guy Sam McDougall, was a big influence on me. He was very good at encouraging people who had interests to follow their interests. Um, my mum and dad always wanted me to do something. My dad was kind of pushed down by his mum, who very much had the idea that if you came to a working class family, that's where you stayed. You never go over your station, never try to show off or anything, you know. And my dad always said to me, "No, you son, you go and do what you want to go and do." So um, that's what I did, and I've never seen what I do as now it's a degree course and all that, so it becomes like uh, you go and get a degree and you do a master's in journalism. I just saw it as a job. I just wanted to go and work and earn a wage, same as my dad, and put money on the table and stuff. So that was my environment was just working, just wanting to work, and it just happened to be the job that I wanted to do was a really interesting job that got me to travel places and meet people. But it's still just a job. So that's just a working ethic from my dad and my mum, same as
So
everybody else, I think.
you said you started off for the Clydebank Press. At what point did you start
Yes.
getting involved in the football side of things and going to games and stuff?
First week, well, first couple, I started at the end of
Really?
July 1981. So the football season was about to start. The guy who did the football had just left. That's why there was an opening for and what happens in a local paper, and in the old days anyway, now local papers are very different. But in those days, you just did everything. And my first day on the Clydebank Press, the editor said to me, "You're going to cover the district court." And I didn't have a clue. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what you did. I didn't know. So, and just people who were there who had been doing it for years kind of got me through it. And that same happened with the football. The first home game for Clydebank was a League Cup tie on a Wednesday night against Berwick Rangers. And they sent me along to Kilbowie to do the game. And I didn't know what you did or anything. But a couple of more experienced guys now not long ago passed away. A guy called Graham Scott worked for Evening Times. Kind of was really nice to me from the start and showed me that's where you go after the game. This is who you talk to, and that was it. So the first couple of weeks I was in, I was covering football, but for the first probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years even I'd been in journalism, moving into national papers. I didn't really. I did football now and again, but mostly it was learning all the other parts of the trade. Doing news reporting and council reporting and sub editing and headline writing and stuff like that. And football just kind of happened once I joined the Sun for the first time in like 1988. Kind of started to happen a wee bit.
You've covered loads of events from the World Cup to
Uh-huh.
the Olympics, but I was just
Uh-huh.
going to ask what out of all those events is the most impactful to yourself?
I I think because of current world events, I think covering the World Cup in Russia in 2018 becomes quite important because I don't know when we'll ever get to go back to Russia again. I'm a big fan of Russia and Russian culture, and spending kind of 6 weeks in Russia, traveling about the place in 2018. At the time, you just think you're covering the World Cup. But when I came back, I wrote a book about it, which is kind of travel based and as well as football based. And I'm glad I did now because there's a lot of people in my job and in loads of other jobs who'll never get to go there again. So I think that was a big one. That was a big one for me. Obviously, the first time you get to go to cover something like the World Cup is massive. You know, 1990 in Italy, I did a wee bit, and then 1998 in France, Scotland being there was huge. And the excitement of getting told you're going to the World Cup is fantastic. Also, the Olympics in Rio in 2016 because I covered that as the kind of the main writer for the National Sun for the for the whole of the UK because the guy called Stephen Howard, who was their main kind of big feature writer guy, had retired ahead of schedule, and they didn't have someone to do the job he did, which is the job I did here, which is the big kind of big analysis pieces and all that. So they asked me to do it kind of for the national paper, which was a wee bit scary, but that was a great experience doing that for the Rio Olympics, which again was a fantastic place to be and to work. But yeah, I think probably Russia 2018 because of what's happened since.
Sounds amazing, man. But is there can you think over your career then, Bill? What would you say is the biggest story that you broke?
That broken person. I've never been a big story breaker. That's never really been my thing. I think probably the biggest story I've worked on, and because at the time in the Scottish Sun we had such a small staff that we all played a part in it, was Maurice Johnson going to Rangers. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and we kind of knew the story was happening, but everybody was denying it. Rangers were denying it. It was point blank. It was no. That's never going to happen. Don't you worry about that. His agent, Bill McMurdo, was denying it. All the big sports journalists, when all the papers were all saying, no, this is nonsense, not happening. But as the Sunday afternoon went on, we kind of knew it was happening. And our editor at the time, Jack Irvin, ended up having a very long conversation with Graham Souness on the phone, where Souness didn't deny it. For the first time, it wasn't denied, and we thought, are we going to go with this? And it was one of the most suspenseful evenings ever because you go out, the story goes to bed, Mo Jones Jers, front page, big thing in the back page. They got me to write a piece about how the history of it and how it was the first Roman Catholic to sign for Rangers in 100 years or whatever, blah, 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 and did all that thing. And then, of course, the paper goes away and you're sitting there going, what if this is nonsense? What if it's not true? And it was a very sleepless night for everybody. And the next morning, of course, you wake up and it's true and it happens, and it was just a massive story. And I don't think stories like that will happen anymore because of the internet and because of agents and the way things leak and everybody knows something about something somewhere. Transfer stories now run for 3 months at a time until they finally either happen or don't happen. But then this story that nobody believed was true came true, and it was fantastic. And it probably made the Scottish Sun had been on the go for 2 or 3 years and was doing okay, but it hadn't really been accepted. And suddenly that morning, people went, "This is a real player in the newspaper game up here," And that was exciting. But listen, I would not claim to be somebody who has broken a lot of stories in his life. It's never really been my thing. I'm more the guy that writes about the big story and why it's happened and what impact it's going to have, etc. But that was a brilliant day to be involved in. That was proper newspapers.
It was a wee bit before my time, that, but see, looking back on that, looking at the footage and stuff, I can't believe Celtic actually allowed that to happen. Parading them in front of people who hadn't even signed the contract yet.
Well, it just shows you the how professionalism changes now. You can't imagine it happening now. Everything's triple locked down, and everything's kept secret to the last second. Nobody says anything until it's absolutely nailed down in there. And there was obviously he had almost done the deal, but not quite. And then Rangers got in touch and said, "Listen, what about it?" And he went, "I'll tell you what." And fair play to him because that was a massive step to take. Culturally, football-wise, he had no problems. He was a great player. He could have played for anybody at that time. He was flying. But culturally, it was groundbreaking. I mean, there was an awful lot of Rangers fans didn't go back. You know, people who just didn't want to go. I knew a mate of mine used to go on a Rangers bus, where the guy, the convener of the bus, used to organise the tickets for all the away games and take them to away games. Then would sit in the bus for 2 hours because he wouldn't go and watch a game where Maurice Johnson was playing. So it was massive, you know. And you're right, for Celtic, it was just such an embarrassment, you know. And I think that was why nobody believed the story was going to happen, because everybody went, well, we've seen him at Celtic Park, you know, with mad kind of Christmas jumper thing he was wearing, the pictures from Celtic, and you know, and he's there, we've seen it. And then suddenly it's not, because he's going across the road and he walks in the next day with the Rangers blazer and the whole thing, and it was huge. It was an amazing story.
You could just imagine the abuse that you would take for trying to break that story. Nowadays, with social media, it would be unbelievable if somebody done that.
I know.
Braden one day and then Simon the next.
And what he would get, what Celtic, the whole thing would be. You're right. It'd be off the scale. It would break the internet. I think probably is the phrase, isn't it? But at that time, things. You know, I remember that night when the story had gone to bed, as you call it, or so you're ready for the paper to print. But the paper maybe wouldn't print till the back of 1 o'clock in the morning, and as it turned out, it was the middle of the summer, so we only had 2 full-time football writers at the time. One of whom was on holiday, and the other one didn't fly. So I had to get one of the sub-editors, who a guy that's not with us anymore, Ian Scott, and they said, you're going to go to Il Choco, to the Rangers training camp tomorrow, to follow Mo Johnston about and report on him. And he went, Jesus, okay. So they sent a taxi back to his house to get a bag, and he came back and he was all ready. And he was flying out first thing in the morning, and I said, he was flying out of Glasgow Airport, and I was living in Paisley at the time. I said, I'll come down to Glasgow Airport, we'll sit in the Excelsior Hotel, and it's now the Holiday Inn at the airport. We'll sit and have a beer, and we'll just relax. And but what I was told to go and babysit him in case he told anybody, right? So there was a bunch of guys I knew, Paisley boys, who came in, big Celtic fans, and it was the only place you could get a drink on a Sunday night in that hotel. So they all came down, they were sitting there, wee man, what's happening, what's in the paper tomorrow? And I couldn't tell them. And then I phoned, because no mobile phones, so I phoned the office about the back of one, and they said, the paper's running, the story's in, it's fine. And then on my way out the door, I told the boys what the story was, and you can imagine what their reaction was. They were not happy bunnies, and they thought I was winding them up until the next day when they found that it was right. So, it's a different world, a different era. Now it would just be, as I say, you wouldn't get that true exclusive, because things aren't exclusive anymore, because everybody knows something and somebody leaks something somewhere, you know.
I was going to ask that how much social media has had an impact in journalism nowadays. Is
huge.
Is it? I was going to say, like, how big is the impact?
It's absolutely massive. I don't really do much social media. We had about 2 editors ago at the paper. The gaffer comes in and says to me, I need you on Twitter. I need you to be a big presence on Twitter. I need stuff out all the time, and blah, blah, blah. And I always remember that I wasn't really keen on it. And the first day I went on, this guy, I put out some bland tweet about quite looking forward to sharing my views on here and blah, blah, blah. And this guy came back and just said, a 2-line tweet that said, we'll have you off here in 3 months. And that was it. And every day you would wake up and there'd be like a million, no matter what you'd written, it was just this big pile on of abuse. And I used to take it very personally. Some people love it. I hated it. And I did last about 3 or 4 months, and I still kept that. I've still got a Twitter account out there somewhere, but I just stopped. I couldn't read it. And people say to me still, oh, you want to see what they're saying about you on Twitter? And I said, I don't care. I really don't care. It's not good for your head. It's not good for your mental health. But it's changed our job completely, because, well, for instance, what happens now is it used to be you'd go to a press conference and you'd be interviewing whoever it was, manager, Scotland manager, Rangers, Celtic, Hearts, whatever it is. And you interview the manager, and he'll do a wee bit with the broadcast, the radio and the TV. He'll do a bit with the Sunday newspapers. He'll do a bit with the daily newspapers. And then you all go off and do your own thing in your own way. Now, journalists are instantly tweeting press conferences. So everything's going out live, so nothing keeps. So then you're having to think, well, what do we do for tomorrow? What do we do for next? So you've then got to try and ask the manager to go away, if he'll speak to you away from the rest of the press. Can we get a wee 10 minutes on your own? And it's very difficult because everything's just instant. And also there's a lot of fan media sites and a lot of internet-based journalism now where people don't actually come and ask any questions. They just come and record everybody else's questions and run away and put it out online. So your job gets a wee bit harder, and it's made what it's made happen is there's a lot more comment now in the media rather than the straight interviews and quotes, because the quotes are out there instantly, so nobody has to buy a paper to get it. They can just get it 10 minutes later on X or wherever it is. So yeah, it's changed it. It has changed it massively in terms of how we do the job and the reaction you get to how you've done your job, because people just pile in and give you absolute dog's abuse.
Do you think it's for the better or for the worse?
No, I think the way society in general uses social media, we've wasted it. We had a phenomenal chance with social media to connect the whole world up and share information and and learn for each other, but it's just become a big playground pile on, hasn't it? People are just and also the whole fishing thing and people having a couple of glasses of wine at night and piling in, and I know journalists that do it. They'll stick a wee fishing rod in at 10 o'clock at night to see what they get, and next thing they wake up in the morning and go, oh God, I've got 75,000 people demanding my head. And that's some people love that. It's not for me. I'm kind of old fashioned with these things. I like writing things, putting them in the paper. People buy the paper the next day. They either like it or they don't like it. That's my kind of dinosaur view on it.
I did want to speak to you a wee bit about that, mate, because obviously, to a much lesser extent, us, just starting this podcast, and then, if I put something out there, on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, some of the comments you get are just, ridiculous, and you're trying to just give a point. I mean, on here we try to just be kind of straight down the line, be honest about things. So that's what I try and do anyway. But some of the comments, man, and it's like, how a guy in your position, it must be poison at times.
There comes a point. I used to try and engage with people, right? Some guy would come on and give you dogs. There's some people that are just beyond communicating with. You just can't. You just block, right? There's other people who give you a real hard time, but you think, all right, I'm going to try and talk to this guy. And I used to try and engage with them and reply, and it would just get worse. And there comes a point, and I think this applies to you guys as well, applies to anybody doing this kind of thing now. There comes a point when you have to accept this is not your problem, this is their problem. If somebody who doesn't know you decides to react to something that you've said by calling you whatever they call you and saying they're going to kill you or they hope you get some terrible illness and all the things that we've all heard, that's their problem, and you've got to leave them with their problem, because that's something that they have to. If they are that angry or they're that paranoid or that vindictive, that's something that they have to sit and live with. And I think you just let them have it. Just let them be who they are. You know what I mean? And you just be who you are. And don't try and work out why they're doing it, because I don't think they know why they're doing it. And one of my great sayings in life is control the controllables. So look after. So all you can do, you can control what you say and how you say it. You can influence how people react by the tone of what you use, and you know when you're fishing a wee bit, when you're being funny, whatever, but you can control that. You can't control people's reactions to what you do, and just let their reactions be what they are. That's what I decided a long time ago.
I totally agree, and it's like, if you're a happy person, this is the way I kind of look at it as well. If you're a happy person and you're scrolling through, whatever social media, and then you decide that you're going to put hate out there, I don't think happy people do that.
No, I don't think so either. And you'll generally find there's some sadness in the person's life that's doing it. There's some sort of cry for attention. A lot of it's, listen to me. Nobody listens to me. Nobody listens. Somebody will be sitting there on their own in their house saying, my wife doesn't listen to me. My Waynes ignore me. My mates don't like me the way they used to. So I'm going to shout at somebody, and so I get some attention. For some people, any kind of attention is good attention, as long as somebody's listening to them. You listen to people on You listen to politicians, you listen to people on radio shows, sometimes, presenters. They'll say things just to get the phone lines to light up. They'll say things just to get a reaction from the opposition parties. And that's the way social media works. So much of it is just give me some kind of attention. I don't care what it is, And for me, that's just such a waste of energy,
My problem is they two are level-headed, so they don't reply back. I reply back, and I end up with one arguing in the comments.
I think when you reply back,
how do you deal with that though? So see, when you get into an argument, how do you deal with that?
I just go whatever they give me, I just give them back the exact same.
Well, if you can do that,
because there was one that was the old forum. There was one that was the old forum, and me, Jamie, and Corey were having a laugh, and then you just get these people, and then they'll ask, I think he said to me, "Don't just leave it," and I was like, "You're the one on your podcast telling me to leave it."
Well, that's the thing. Listen, if you're able to do that on a one-to-one basis, and you don't come away with it. Here's the thing. See, when you're finished with it, how do you feel? Do you come away feeling that was a good laugh, or do you come away feeling drained or angry?
I'm fine. I just think it's a laugh.
That's fine. Well, if you're fine, you're fine. That's cool.
I
don't want to do it with people. I'm happy with confrontation face to face with people. If I've written something that somebody doesn't like and they phone me up, or I meet them in the street or whatever, and they want to pull me up, great, we'll have a conversation. But see people randomly coming on and giving you abuse. If you're okay with that, that's cool. But I think when you get into a situation where you're trying to defend yourself and try to fight people off, I think you just go, no, that's not for me.
It's funny we're talking about this actually, because when I got up this morning, I was straight on Facebook, and there's a couple of comments and I bit to them, man. Right, and then about a minute later, I was like, deleting them. I'm deleting them. It gives them satisfaction. I think when you actually
absolutely. That's what I'm saying. It's people get fueled sometimes by attention and you've bit, and the one what's the phrase that I used to hear all the time? You hear of a lot of Old Firm fans where you reply to something and it's, I'm trying to think the exact words that's going out of my head, but basically it's, we've got him here, we've got this guy here, and once you're in, you can't get back out. So I just don't go in.
But then that's when they pull the fishing rod out of it, because they don't need to be it, but then they pull it out to try and recover it. I was only kidding on.
I just not let it go, let the fish go.
But anyway, we'll not give these fools any more energy.
Good idea.
You mentioned earlier on, mate, that you're a St Mirren fan.
Yes.
What's your earliest memories of going to day games then?
The first game I ever went to, right, I was probably about 18, 19 months old. My dad always wanted to take me when I was there. My sister got really angry. My sister's 7 years older than me, my big sister Anne, right? And my dad used to take her, and as soon as I was big enough, she get dumped onto my mum on a Saturday to go to the shops, and I was in, right? And she's never forgiven me for that, right? But my dad started taking me. We went up to, I don't remember this because you're far too young, but he wanted to take me, and my uncle used to drive us about. My dad never had a car. My uncle used to drive us about, and he took us out to Dens Park. And the Dundee at the time were brilliant. They'd just been in the semi-final of the European Cup. They were a fantastic team. They'd won the league. And my dad told me years later, when I was able to grasp these things, we lost 9-2. It was the biggest defeat of the century for St Mirren, right? And my dad always said that he did me a favour because it would never ever be as bad as that ever again, whatever happened. I thought that's quite a good attitude. So my first memories, all my first memories are of being at the football with my dad. That was my time with him, because he worked, like most people's dads, he worked 6 days a week. He was 5 days a week and then half day on a Saturday in a paper mill. And Saturday afternoon was our time. We used to have our lunch together before we went out, then we'd go to the game. And that was what St Mirren was about for me, was going to the game with him. And although when you get to kind of maybe 14, 15, you start going with your pals and stuff, I kind of always missed being there with my dad, because it was as much about that as it was about, because if you went for the football, you were going to be sorely disappointed, because we were really very good in those days. But that was my earliest memory, and in among that, one of the things that kind of defined how I feel about football is my dad would never take me. The only games I ever went to was when Rangers and Celtic came to Love Street, because he wouldn't take me when they came because of what Rangers and Celtic were about. And that kind of stuck with me early on, because at first I thought, well, why am I not getting to see the Lisbon Lions and Jim Baxter and, and these amazing players? But he was right, because it's a bad environment to take a kid into and listen to the stuff that goes on with Rangers and Celtic. And I really I was very grateful to him for that in later years. But that was always me and my dad at the football, standing at the same bit every week at the edge of the Love Street end penalty box against the same barrier with the same people every week for donkey's years, whether we're in the first division or the second division or the Scottish Cup, whatever, it's the same place all the time. It was brilliant.
What about players wise? Is there anybody that you idolised back then?
Well, the first guy I idolised was a guy called Andy McFadden, who was a centre half. And the reason I idolised him was he lived about 2 streets away from us, and I used to see him waiting for the bus. And I used to think, that guy plays for St Mirren. That's fantastic. My first big hero was a guy called Ali McLeod, and Ali McLeod was what you would call now number 10, and he was a guy who, in 1972, when Rangers had come back from winning the Cup Winners' Cup in Barcelona, their first home game was against us in the League Cup at Ibrox, and we beat them 4-1, and Ali McLeod scored the 4 goals, and it was phenomenal. It was unheard of. Rangers scored first, and then he scored 4 goals, and it was just fantastic. And he just became an instant overnight hero for me. Big Gordon McQueen played centre half for us when he was a kid before he went to Leeds United, who was a fantastic player as well. The team that I then came into, just as I was kind of coming to an age where I was doing things on my own, kind of 13, 14-year-old Alec Ferguson's team that won the first division in 1977 with Tony Fitzpatrick, Billy Stark, Frank McGarvey, all these boys, was just brilliant. They played magnificent football. We were scoring goals for fun. Crowds went, and when Alec Ferguson came in, we were playing the old second division in front of about 1,300, 1,400 people in this big old ramshackle stadium. By the time he left to go to Aberdeen, we were playing to 14,000, 15,000, and so he 10 times the crowds, just through his enthusiasm and what he did with the team, what he did for the town. It was an incredible time to be a supporter. He was just the most astonishing man to have running your team, and we sacked him. There you go. We sacked him.
You've touched on it before, like your love for St Mirren and stuff. Was that your inspiration behind Penthouse and Pavement then?
It was more the my sort of dislike of the old firm, because we're always told in journalism, we're always told, well, it's all about Rangers and Celtic, it's all about selling papers, Rangers Celtic, and I thought there must be a world where people understand that if you support Albion Rovers or East Stirling or Cowdenbeath or whatever it is, it matters to you every bit as much as somebody supporting Rangers or Celtic. And I wanted to write a book about that, about how football is love for whoever you love, and also a lot of people choose to support the big teams because there's success, and they choose to support Man United or Liverpool or Barcelona or Rangers Celtic. You don't choose to support St Mirren or Cowdenbeath or East Stirling or whatever. They choose you when you're a wee boy or a wee girl, whatever, right? And so I wanted to do a book that was about grassroots football and how to survive without having that kind of glory thing going on. One of my favourite bits in it is there's a bit in it about when Motherwell won the Scottish Cup against Dundee United in 1991. And my mate Andy, who's a rabid Motherwell supporter, hates every other club in the universe, right? And he was writing about how they all went back to the pub after Hampden after beating Dundee United, probably the greatest Scottish Cup final ever, 1991, 4-3 extra time. The McLean brothers against each other as managers, Jim and Tommy. Amazing game of football. And he was back in, and this group of boys came in who were all Rangers fans, and all came in and went, "Brilliant, boys, delighted for you. Mum will buy you a drink. You've won a wee cup and all that, right?" And they got chased out the pub, basically. And this isn't your night. Beat it. They don't come and patronise us. And that's a cleaned up version for this podcast, right? But it was right because this was theirs. This was Motherwell's night. It wasn't anybody else's night to enjoy, And it's the same when St Mirren won the cup in '87. My God, it was just It's just the best night, just absolutely fantastic night. So yeah, it was all that book. I mean, that's now 1999 that came out, and that was all about watching football in hope rather than expectation.
Mm.
You know, and the one thing that happens once in your life that's brilliant is all the more brilliant for it. That was the thought behind that.
It's funny you should talk about that though, but when we first started this podcast, I remember I was sharing it everywhere, and I was like, try to get people to have a wee look and stuff. And this guy messaged me, and he was like, "Listen," he says, "it's a good idea you've got, the content's good and all that." He says, "But all you're talking about is selling Rangers." And he's like, like, if you want to be an old firm podcast, fair enough. He says, but remember, there's other teams in Scotland and that are caring just as much as you care. And I really took that on board, and now I'm trying.
That's absolutely right. And I get it that if you had if all your podcast was about Stennismuir and Berwick Rangers, whatever, you might have a very niche audience. But the fact that, and we forget, in newspapers and TV and radio forgets that the other teams matter every bit as much. I'm not saying that if it was Celtic against Morton in a cup final that Morton should get half a Hampden, because they're not going to fill half a Hampden. But there's this kind of presumption that everything should be weighted towards Rangers and Celtic, and I've just never believed that should be the case.
Well, you're right in saying that, because it doesn't matter who Rangers or Celtic play in finals. Rangers have got their end at Hampden, Celtic's got their end, and whoever they play puts wherever you want them to play.
Isn't it amazing that in a national stadium you've got two ends named after two clubs? It's absolutely bizarre. So if when Hibs play Hearts at Hampden in the Scottish Cup final, one gets a Rangers end and one gets a Celtic end. It's bonkers.
It's crazy. Yeah. I wanted to talk a wee bit about you go on TalkSport, mate. I listen to TalkSport every single day. You're on with Simon and Jim White and that sometimes. Yeah. How's that, mate?
I love it. I love the two of them. I've known Jim for a million years. He's a brilliant guy, Jim. I used to go on Scotsport quite a lot back in the day, and he's just a top man. And Simon Jordan's one of these guys that when I used to hear him at First Donkeys years ago, I thought, no, you'd love to slap this guy. But as you get to, he's changed, because if you ever read his book, he's got a great book. Be careful what you wish for, it's called. And it's all about building a fortune, then losing a fortune. And now he's building his fortune back up again. And the difference in him since he lost it is amazing, because he's gained a lot of humility. He's still got massive opinions, but he's a different kind of guy. And him and Jim together are terrific. And independent who's on with them, either Martin Keown or Danny Murphy or whoever's on, it becomes a really interesting chat. And Jim knows how to press Simon's buttons to get him going. I'm really glad when they get in touch to talk about stuff, because as well, they know what they're talking about. They really do. You go into some shows, you go into some radio shows, and it's obvious that the presenter's been fed some stuff from his producer saying, ask this, ask that. Jim and Simon know where to take things, and they won't take any nonsense off you. So it's a really interesting show to be on. I really like it.
I totally agree. It just reminded me about when earlier on you were saying about how some journalists will put stuff out there and try and get clicks and all that. That's what TalkSport does, isn't it?
Of course it is. And again, Jim is very good at, if it's not that it's really a quiet morning for them, but if it's not quite going as busy as he thinks, he might just say something. He'll just make something up. He'll just, he'll say, and of course, Simon, you said to me the other day, just during that cup of coffee during the ad break, that you think, Mikel Arteta should be sacked and run out of town. And Simon will sit there and go, right, and next thing the phones go mental, and that's him for the next hour. And that's Jim's an absolute master at the wind up at getting things going. He's brilliant at it, and he's Jim's longevity in journalism is remarkable. He's a tremendous guy, and he's one of these guys who gets a mickey taken out of him a lot. He used to get it a lot of time with Jonathan Watson, only excuse and all that, and he takes that very well. But you only get that happening to you if people have got a lot of respect for you. You don't get it if you're an idiot. If you're an idiot, you're an idiot. There's no winding up. You don't caricature an idiot. You only caricature somebody who's got character, and that's what they do with Jim. And he's a top boy.
Yeah, it seems to work with him too, because it's Jim, Jim White doesn't seem like he's not smiling ever. He's always happy, chirpy, and I don't think I've seen Simon Jordan smile once.
No,
Or
that's right.
say anything positive. He's glass half empty type of guy, and Jim's with the other half.
I think Simon's always thinking, right, what's my reaction to this? Where am I going next? How's this going to make me look? Because I'll notice it sometimes. You guys know these things. I've got the same thing with that, obviously, with them. And when Simon's not talking, he's quite often get that kind of look of, I am not interested in what these guys are saying. I want to be the guy speaking. Right? What can I do to get back into talking this conversation here? Whereas Jim's sitting there with a big Jim White smile on and he's happy as Larry, you know.
That's what I mean. He's just happy with life, Jim type of thing. What a glorious day. Simon's not. He went back in his bed.
Jim's always saying, here we are in the 17th floor of the news building and the sun's shining and I've just got a cup of coffee and I'm so happy.
See, to be fair to talk sport though, I mean, obviously, first thing in the morning, you've got Ali McCoy, you've got Shaban, you've got Alan Brazil. Sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, is this Clyde One? You know what I mean? But and then later on, obviously, and they do give Scottish football a good bit of attention these days.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, obviously, they don't have the license for Scottish games, and maybe they wouldn't want it. I don't know. But yeah, they do. I mean, especially with Ali and Alan and Shaban, they all want to talk about Scottish stuff. When it goes on later on in the day, you've got Jamie O'Hara's and stuff. They don't really care very much. I think Ali's done magnificently. I think he's reinvented himself superbly as a pundit, and I think he's found his place. You know, he never stops. He's on TV in Paris one night. He's back in the studio the next day. He's away doing a league game the next day. He's all. Everybody wants him because he's just a natural communicator. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a much happier place for him than the dugout was for a start. I don't think he'll ever be as happy as he was when he was scoring goals. But I don't think being a manager really suited him because there was too many people to fall out with. And Ali wants to be your pal. He wants to say what he's saying, then have a laugh, and then go for a beer. And I think he can do that in the job he's doing. And he's very, very good at it.
He's first class and his enthusiasm's infectious. You could literally watch a third division Bulgarian game or whatever.
I know.
And he'd be commentating and you'd be invested in it.
I need to tell you, that's the best pass I've ever seen MD ever make ever. Make no mistake, that's the greatest shy MD's ever taken.
So one where the AC/DC song comes on and he just the first beat kicks in.
I know. They always do that on the European nights at Ibrox when he's down on the trackside doing his bit. They always, as soon as he's walking back up to the commentary gantry, they start playing it. They start playing AC/DC for
him. We'll go back to St Mirren again, mate. What's your thoughts on the current St Mirren team? Obviously, Stephen Robinson's doing a terrific job, eh?
Amazing. He's a very deep guy. He's not a guy who sets out to make everybody his pal, but he's brilliant. I mean, I think the most overlooked part of a manager's job is making players better, taking what you've got and making it better. And he does that, and then he takes players who have had setbacks in their careers elsewhere, and he kind of gets them and he mends them and he makes them. We've got a big boy, Richard Taylor, big centre back, who came in a couple of seasons ago down south. He was floating about. He'd ended up playing for some kind of Netflix documentary team or something, one of these kind of reality show teams. He was going nowhere. We brought him in. I think they gave him something like £500 or £600 a week to set himself up. He's had 2 years with us. He's leaving now, and it looks like he's going to sign for, I think, Luton Town, which will be 3-4 times the money he
that's a good jump up.
So it'll be 3 or 4 times the money he can get with us, and that's what Stephen Robinson does. He makes people believe in themselves, and he brings out the best in them. And he's done it with the boy Olasanya. It's just gone to Houston Dynamos in the MLS. He's done it with Miko Mandron, the boy played up beside him. Mark O'Hara, our captain. He's done it with him, a guy who kind of drifted from team to team, and he's now a big part of things. Got a boy called Killian Phillips, who's just won all the Club Player of the Year awards. He was at Crystal Palace and kind of drifting a wee bit, and was a boy from Dublin. He's a really good player, but he was kind of drifting. He went to Aberdeen last season, did nothing, and Robinson went to the board and said, I want to get this guy in, and they said, well, he did nothing at Aberdeen. I'm telling you, get him in. He's been outstanding, and he's now got a 2-year, he came on loan, he's now got a 2-year contract. He'll make the club a lot of money in the next year or so. And a lot of that's down to Stephen Robinson's ability to manage. So we've been top 6 3 seasons in a row. I think that this one, the third one, even though we didn't get to Europe as we did last year, this has been the best one because this has been the hardest league to play in because of the money Aberdeen have spent, money Hearts spent, the form Hibs have showed, the way Dundee United came through. I think to be in that top 6 ahead of Hearts was remarkable, and he's an amazing manager, and somebody will get him. Somebody will get him in the next bit.
And he's
But
had
he'll
your
get
problems,
to choose.
didn't you? He's had your
Absolutely.
problems with players as well that he brought in, like John Rooney, and he's had to let them go, and he's still fought to get them top 6.
He had 3 players who had to go because of off-field stuff involving the police.
Yes.
And the board handled it exceptionally well as well. They basically said, Stephen, we're going to have to deal with this very quickly. We've got a big investment from the Kibble, the sort of the charity organisation that deals with a lot of real problem kids and ex-offenders and stuff. And they couldn't have been seen for the club to be hanging on to people who were in trouble with the police. It wouldn't have been a good look for victims and whatever else. So the club acted very quickly, and there was 3 players who came in who were going to be a big part of the team who all had to go. But we recruited again very quickly and picked up guys that were out of contract and actually probably upgraded in all 3 positions. And that's where the board and Stephen worked very, very well together. And so that's why I think to be top 6 this season, considering the money that our teams are spending, considering the off-field problems and the pressure that was on the team, because playing in Europe at the start of the season screwed everything up because everybody's head was everywhere, travelling about Europe. And by the end of August, I thought we were actually going to really struggle. So to come back from that and everything else, I think this has been his best season yet. And if we get one more season out of him, I'll be amazed if he's not picked up by a fairly big club after that.
Are you surprised that Hearts didn't come in for him? Because obviously we better talk about that. And obviously
Well,
we're doing the Derek tennis route. But
I think Derek or Stephen would have been the two I'd have been looking at for that job, and they've obviously made a decision on Derek, and I think Derek will do very well. A big fan of Derek McInnes. I think he's a right kind of guy for Hearts. But yeah, I would have thought that Stephen would have been very high on their. And I think if Hibs had gone, if Hibs had the wee sliding doors moment earlier in the season and David Gray had gone, I think Stephen would have been very high in the list as well. So yeah, I mean, there's clubs in the Championship and League One down south kind of sniffing around them just now, and I wouldn't be surprised if another good season and somebody really sizable came in to get him, which would be a great reward for him. And I think one day as well he wants to be Northern Ireland manager, but he's probably got a couple of jobs in him before then. He's still young enough, to do club stuff for a while yet.
Right, mate, this is the clip moment where I ask you that everybody's been asking about. What's the script with the 49ers, mate? What's happening with him? Have you got any exclusives for us? Go on. Let's make it a big podcast, this one.
You want to put a paper out of business? I can't tell you.
What's your thoughts on that anyway?
My thoughts, I wrote about it small in my column. I think there is a massive cultural change needs to happen at Rangers. I think it's been very badly run for a long time. I think the image of the club isn't what American owners will want. If you think back to the last Old Firm game and the big banner with a shotgun and soon, I think they must have looked at that and said, "What are we walking into here?" I think there's a massive. They need to get the right manager in. They need to get the right players in. That's the short term. I think in the long term, there's a cultural change needs to happen at Rangers, where they become a lot more outward looking and a lot less affected by what happens across the city at Celtic. And I think Celtic, to an extent, need to do the same with Rangers, but they've got at least a model just now that's working for them. Rangers haven't seemed to know for a long time what they want to be, except they want to be better than Celtic. That's all that seems to matter. So I think there's a big cultural change needs to happen. I don't think 20 million is going to do an awful lot. I think it's a good down payment on, it might get them closer to things next season, but, you watch PSG winning the Champions League and you think, what's 20 million quid going to do in the big scale of things, It's a massive job. It's a massive job. But I think they will have a very different outlook on what Rangers is or are than previous boards have, because previous boards have had a thread running through them of what you might call Rangers men, and they're not there anymore. It's a different animal now, and I think you're going to see it run more as a project, as a business, than as I don't know what you would call it. Probably even more than just a football club. They will want it now to be a return on their investment, and that's going to take a lot of changes.
I think
Management-wise, managerially, it's been really weird, right? Because until the old board went away at the end of the week, if you spoke to 4 different people at Rangers, you would hear 4 different managers because they all had a different interest. Dave King was selling Gerrard, somebody else was trying to sell you Russell Martin, somebody else was saying that Ancelotti was the right guy. And that kind of said a lot about Rangers because there was no kind of definite voice saying, listen, when there's something to tell you, we'll tell you, but here's a wee steer for now. Everybody's got their own agenda and everybody's telling a different story,
From what I heard, the 49ers wanted Gerrard, but Red Bull, who are going to have a saying stuff, supposedly want Marco Rose or Ancelotti.
Well, I think Ancelotti's made it clear that he wants to break out for his dad, and his dad's basically said you can do that, and if it doesn't work out, you've always got a job. So that's a nice place for him to be in. Again, doesn't have managerial experience of his own. Then you look at Russell Martin, who has a very definite style of play, but doesn't really have success to his name. His last job at Southampton was not a good one. He took them up.
The only success was he took them up, wasn't it? That was it.
Yeah, he did well. He did well to take them up through the playoffs, and that was great and made them money. But it was the way he played was very unsuccessful at English Premier League level. It might work at our level. I don't know. Marco Rose is a successful manager. They looked at the former Ajax manager, but he blew one last season big time. So there'd be a reason why people would be available to come to Rangers, and it would be because they need a job. And the only one who doesn't actually need a job is probably Ancelotti, who's ready to strike out on his own. The rest of them all are out of work basically and could do with getting back into football.
Because it was Italian press that says he's 99.9% going to get knocked back for Pisa, I think it was, with Pirlo.
Yeah. He was looking at Como at first, and then his Fabregas was meant to be going to Leverkusen. That never happened, so he didn't go there. He's very much in demand as the kind of the next big thing, as Carlo's boy, and obviously he's got great connections through his dad, which is going to help anybody. But you're saying 99.9%. A week ago, somebody was telling you Russell Martin 99.9, and then Dave King's telling everybody, listen, Steven Gerrard's the right man. So what I'm saying is there's so many different voices around at Rangers, and I think that says a lot about how fractured the club is internally on what they think and what they want. I think it'll happen now that Kevin Thelwell's in the door. That then gives the club a voice. As a director of football, he says, right, I'll take charge of this now. I'll make the announcement.
Am I right in saying that he was there when Ancelotti was the manager at Everton? Was he at Everton at that time? Yes.
Yes. Yeah,
so that could be a good shout for Ancelotti then, isn't it?
It could be. Kevin Thiel was there through a lot of firefighting at Everton, through some really bad times, and has some mistakes to his name in terms of signings because they made some big signings that didn't go well under his watch. But he seems to be a very approachable guy. He's also a very knowledgeable guy. He's brought in his own guy who was at Everton in charge of recruitment, instead of the guy Niels Koppen, who's going to be leaving. So he's already putting his mark down on what he wants. But the thing is, in terms of, what it's like in Glasgow, guys, you're either first or you're last between Rangers and Celtic, right? There's no second place involved here. And they've only got a matter of weeks to put a manager and new players in place to try and hit the ground running for the Champions League qualifiers. And it could be that if they don't get it right, they get to October and they're back in the same position again that they were in this time last year of being off the pace. So it's a really, I'm sure the 49ers are looking at it saying, look, this is a 3-year, 5-year, whatever it is, long haul, let's get it sorted. But if you're a Rangers fan, you're sitting there saying, no, I want to win something now. I want to be in the Champions League. I want to win the league. I want to, blah, blah, blah. And that's something that's very difficult for them to make happen, no matter what the money is, no matter who the personnel are. It's very difficult to make that happen in the space of time that they have. You're looking at July. Middle of July to be playing in Europe.
Aye, I'm not that bothered with Champions League, see, as long as we make Europa League, because that's our level.
Well, I think you're right. I think that's and I think
I'm happy with Europa League.
And I think if Celtic were honest, it's probably their level as well. If they want to go far in a tournament, I think Celtic did really well in the Champions League. But with a different kind of draw, they could just as easily have been out early doors. And I think Europa League, I think lots of teams have shown it. You know, Spurs and Man United showed it this year. You can have a terrible season and you can still go a long, long way in the Europa League. And Rangers have done it now 2 or 3 times where their only real success has been Europa League. And I think if you had both Scottish teams in there and both get into the last 8 or whatever, it could be great for the game as well as great for the clubs themselves. And I think that's a very healthy attitude to say that's the level, you know, because you say this, you might say the same if you were, so let's say you're Southampton with Russell Martin. Are you better being up near the top of the Championship, winning most of your games and then maybe just missing out on promotion? Or do you want to go to the Premier League and end up with fewer points than anybody else in history? Because the deflation that causes for the next couple of years in terms of your image in front of the world is massive. You know, if you get into the Champions League and you get pumped every week, or you get into Europa League and you win enough games to get you into the last 32 or 16, the perspective of you is completely different.
I agree. And I think you're spot on about it being fractured as well, though, because we've known about this 49ers takeover for absolute months now. You know, all the names that are getting thrown out. I actually think it's going to be somebody we've not heard about. You know, I don't know how much you know about this, Bill, but like Stephen Presley being appointed today, I hadn't even heard he was in the run for that Dundee job.
Well, I mean, it's only yesterday. I mean, again, this could be a complete smokescreen on Dundee's part, but they asked permission for Linfield to speak to David Healy. So when you ask for permission to speak to someone, you're probably thinking the guy's going to get the job, unless he's turned around last night and said, no, it's not for me, no thanks very much. Maybe it's David Healy at Rangers, you don't know. And next thing, Stephen Presley's away on holiday for his silver wedding and has to say to his missus, by the way, I'm going up the road to Dens Park to take the Dundee job.
That's what a honeymoon is.
Happy anniversary, darling. You know,
he was at really, Brentford, wasn't he? He just put his notice in last week at Brentford.
He had been at Fleetwood Town and then he was at Brentford and he's bringing a guy with him. His assistant boy, David Longwell, used to be in charge of youth at St Mirren. He was a really clever guy, David, and was at Fleetwood as well. And so that's again, Dundee have done well to keep that one up the cuff, you know, and just to spring it on people, you know, because most people are looking at Rangers and saying, right, that's where all of these energy is going. And Dundee will sneak that one under the radar. So it's a very interesting move, seeing how big Stephen does up there.
I was thinking about like when obviously Motherwell, Kilmarnock and Dundee didn't have managers at the time. And I was thinking to myself, Dundee have got the biggest pressure here because they were the one that chose to get rid of Tony Docherty. Kilmarnock and Motherwell managers decided to move on. But, you know, obviously I was thinking, you know, if they're going to get rid of Tony Docherty, they need to make absolutely sure that the next man they bring in is going to be better. So, you know, as Stephen Presley.
I felt really sorry for Tony Docherty. I know they underachieved this season. But when they got it right under Tony, they were a smashing team. They were a really good team, and
I guess Celtic Rangers, they were brilliant.
But I mean, I've watched them. They battered us. They battered Hibs earlier on the season. They can play, and I think we're too quick now to just pull the trigger. You know, I mean, the Motherwell one was an odd appointment from the start, and it obviously just didn't work. Derek, I think, was going to go at the end of this season anyway, whatever happened. I think his time at Kelly was coming to an end, but I thought Tony was desperately unlucky to lose his job. I really did. I thought it was a real shame. When you think that the two guys below him who both got relegated are still on a job, but Dundee get rid of Tony, so that's a big call for them to do that, and it puts a lot of pressure on Stephen Presley.
Tony might end up getting a Kilmarnock or Motherwell job.
No, it's not Kilmarnock. Kettlewell's just got
that. Motherwell could take him then.
I mean, I would, if I had said on our own podcast at work a couple of weeks ago that I thought Tony Docherty would have been great for Kilmarnock. He's been there before as number 2. I think he'd hit the ground running there. But they've obviously gone for Stewart, which is great. He's a smashing guy. But when you think that St Johnstone and Ross County were both loyal to their managers despite being relegated, I think Tony's been really unlucky.
Definitely, mate. The last thing I want to speak about, Bill, is I know that you're in your spare time, you're a therapist as well, mental health therapist.
Yeah. Yes.
What is your thoughts on today's, how does football deal with mental health problems, do you think?
I don't think enormously well. I think there are a lot of sports psychologists working in football. I'm not quite sure. For instance, I was speaking to somebody who does a lot of work with the PFA Scotland, who will pay for therapy for players, but there's not a huge take up sometimes because a lot of players don't know about it. In other sports, you take rugby for instance. You look at the Glasgow Warriors, and you look at the Scotland rugby team, have basically a full-time psychologist all the time. They're all the time, pre-match, after match. Phone me anytime. And young guys now, not just in sport, but people are more fragile than they used to be. Football 10 years ago was somebody came in and said, I'm a wee bit down this week. You totally dry your eyes and go on with it, which isn't necessarily a healthy thing. People are less resilient, I think, than in previous generations. And I think we need to do more within football to look after players in that situation. I think injuries can really set a player's mental health back. They can become very detached and very lonely very quickly. And I just generally think we need to. We're moving away from the man's man culture, but I don't think we're moving away quick enough. And I think probably at the top level, players are getting a lot more help than they are further down the tree. I still think that as you go further down the football food chain, players are basically lifted and dumped. And let's face it, at the end of the day, football is such a defined sport where if it's nothing each with 5 minutes to go and you win 1-0, you're the happiest guy in the world, whether you're a fan, a manager, or a player. If you lose a goal with 5 minutes to go, you're the unhappiest guy in the world. And nothing could have changed. The game itself might not have changed, but that 1-0 win or 1-0 defeat changes everything. And mentally, I think that can be very destructive for players. And I think the ability to handle that is something that we need to talk to them more about. And it's something I'm very, very interested in, not just in football, but in life in general, about how to handle disappointment, how to handle rejection, how to open up about everyday feelings. Men are terrible for it. We just got on with it. We're taught by our dads and by their dads before them that you shove it down and clock in for your work and get on with it. And I think it's got to change. It's changing slowly, but it needs to change a lot quicker.
I was going to ask, is there any guidance you would give to any young people wanting to enter the mad world of Scottish sports journalism?
Well, if I was starting out now, it would be a completely different game, so it would be very different advice. Things I would say: there's no such thing as a stupid question. Ask the question. If you want to be the guy that sits at the back and holds up his dictaphone and takes everybody else's work, fine. But if you want to do the job properly, ask a question, right? And the manager might look at you and pull a face, but ask your question. That's when you become a journalist, when you're able to ask things. Never treat two games as the same. I'll read some, and I'm not going to name them. I could read certain journalists go to a different game in a different stadium every week, and you would think they were at the same game in the same stadium because they just write the same thing. A man scored a goal last night, and then he said, "I'm really happy." Right? Every game's different. Every game's different. Doesn't matter whether the score's the same, the weather's the same. Something's different, right? And that's your job to find that, and it's your job. I always say that if you're going to write a match report or you're going to commentate on a game on the radio, whatever you're going to do it the way you would tell your mates in the pub. So you walk back into the pub and they would say, "What was the game like?" You don't go, "Well, the wind was blowing very strongly as the game kicked off. And inside you can say, wait to tell me this goal, the guys, wait to tell you this is the greatest goal I've ever seen in my life. That's how you tell. You paint a picture to people who weren't there so they feel like they were there. That's my number one bit of advice to anybody who wants to do the job.
Brilliant, mate. I think that's a good place to end it, man. Could talk to you for about another 3 hours, Bill, but unfortunately we don't have the time. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate, getting through everything.
For me
you're a
as
legend,
well.
mate. Thanks very much for it.
Good, and all the best going forward. Really enjoyed it.
Same with yourself, mate. All the best for you.
All the best, guys.
Cheers,
All
man.
the best. Cheers.